All right, we're live. Yes. Okay. All right. Hey, this is our weekly Friday, just open discussion, whatever we just kind of put together. I love it. It's lots of fun. Today, we're going to be talking about communication. So, this is, I'll be honest with you, this is not a topic that I am well versed in. I went and got a book on it just to better understand it because after hearing or listening to you last week, I was like, I need to know more. So, Heather, you're the expert on this, and I would love to learn more. So, it's April, so it's Autism Awareness Month. This is something we want to talk about, but just understanding that language as a whole, the context, the understanding, the communication impacts most kids, if not all kids, with neurodevelopmental issues and concerns. So, let's dive into this. Let's give us a little bit of understanding of. So the question, you brought up the question, and why is my child not engaging with me? Which I think is a fantastic question. Let's talk about that. Why is this happening? What's going on? Can you explain this as a parent? What does this mean to me?
Well, in the scope of autism, more than most of all in autism, but really in a lot of developmental challenges. Mm-hmm. And by the way, one thing I have to say about developmental delays is that there is a misconception that all that means is my child's a little behind, but they're going to catch up. A developmental delay, usually the gap gets broader, not just catching up. That's very rare. And I just want to say that up front because we have families very dismayed years later, wishing they hadn't listened to the people who told them they would just catch up. It happens. It's very, very rare.
So
yeah.
Just to clarify, what you mean by that is my child is delayed. They don't leapfrog, they're behind and then they kind of leapfrog and catch up. They stay back and that gap can even further, correct?
That's right. I mean, there is a range, like when you look at developmental charts, which should have primitive reflexes on them and they don't as milestones. But there is a range of ages in which things happen. And of course there's going to be individual differences. But if you start getting even a month or 2 or 3 beyond that range and they're not doing those things, a month or 2 or 3 doesn't sound long in our lives. It's like a snap of a finger. But
right.
How much of a percentage of a little infant toddler's life is that? And I mean, that continues as they're growing through childhood too.
Right.
A small amount of time is a much bigger expanse in their existence.
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
is. So, but one of the reasons people don't engage, I mean, communication and engagement are socially, emotionally motivated. So if my social emotional skills are not developing, which is the case almost always in autism, as well as some other challenges, then I don't care to communicate with you. That's one thing. Another thing is if my sensory motor system is not processing information correctly, that's going to impact language development. We're learning about our environment as we move around it. And if my tactile sense is off and I don't feel rough, smooth, hard, soft, silky, I'm not going to have words for that because I don't even get it, that kind of thing. And then sometimes it is a pure language delay, and every stage matters. I mean, the ba 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 and then ba da ba da ba da. I'm doing babbling, reduplicated babbling. Those are called. And then I start having single words, and then you can kind of roughly look at what is a child's age and how long their utterances should be as a rough guideline.
Okay.
So you're 2 years old, they should definitely be doing like 2 to 3 word utterances in typical development.
Gotcha. Okay.
When they're 4 to 5, that kind of thing, utterances. But social emotional, my world's not making sense to me from a sensory motor perspective. Or, of course, auditory processing is one of the biggies with a pure language delay, because if it's garbage coming into my ears, I'm not going to be able to be. You might be modeling it for them, but they're not being exposed to it because it's just not computing in their brains.
Okay, so there's a lack of what was the word? What was the first example you gave? Like there's no essential reward for communication, and so they're not it doesn't benefit them to communicate. There's no real reason to engage. Is that
Yeah,
the first one?
I care about you. I want to know how you're doing. I care what you think. And so I'm going to talk to you. I don't talk to you because I'm told to. So
Got
that's
it. Huge
that kind of
difference.
thing. Yes.
Okay, so that's the first one. Okay, the second one, which I'm familiar with, is the sensory motor system and how that develops and impacts that. Okay, awesome. So let's say a parent comes in, they're saying, okay, well, my child isn't engaging with me, all right? And so we got these two scenarios, right? Is it one versus the other? Like, or is there a blend of the two? Like, how do I kind of navigate this as a parent? Like, what am I looking for? Is there something you can help me kind of navigate this scenario?
Well, if your child, I mean, we need to look at the stages of development before I talk. I mean, I have eye contact with you.
Yes.
That's one, and then I might then start. I respond to my name when I'm called. I pay attention to your gestures, and then I move into paying attention to your verbal communication. No eye contact is one of the early signs, as well as a child who can't sit still for 1 second, lack of attention, because there are a couple of stages of attention I want to talk about. A lot of times this isn't obvious until we're in school and they can't pay attention to the teacher, but there are early stages of attention that have to be in place. I must be able to be calm, alert, and attend to you before I can engage. And of course, that sensory motor can get in the way, and I have to have this social desire to engage with you.
Okay, so because I know that not making eye contact is one of the first things that they're kind of saying is a key indicator for autism, right? Like that's what they're saying. Like if your 1-2-year-old is not making any eye contact with you, okay. So from your aspect, from a brain balance aspect, what does that mean to you all? Like, what are you all finding with your testing, and what do you see? Help me understand that.
Well, one thing, and it's interesting because I just had a call this afternoon with a mom who is really confused because she has a 16-year-old who has autism, and he is a very fluent reader, but but he can't make inferences. He couldn't find the main idea, the gist of the story to save his life. Like, I can spout off all the football stats for this team, but I didn't know that the story was about sportsmanship.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then there's another child who has trouble orally reading, but if she hears it out loud, she can answer all the questions. So understanding that in autism, in my experience and in any textbook, I don't like all or nothing, but 100% of the time I have worked with autistic kids over the last several decades. They have difficulty with the big picture. So we have some who come in who are completely nonverbal. There is no vocalization coming out of their mouths. We have others who engage in echolalia, and we can dive into some different things to look for that are very telling in that, where they just repeat what you said. Do you want to go to the park? Do you want to go to the park? They just repeat it back because they don't know what to do, or they lift certain words out of that. We can talk about what all that means, but it affects the entire brain. And we know the cerebellum is so involved, our motor control system, and we've talked about primitive reflexes in the sensory system. So we're going to find issues there. Some of our kids with autism, and with most of the kids that come in on one level or another, but the right hemisphere is more of our global thinking. And so that
30,000-foot view sort of thing.
Yes. Okay. We have some kids who have language reasoning issues. It may look like they don't have a language challenge until they get exposed to compound sentences and complex sentences, or sentences where there are double negatives. Like, I did not know that he was not going to show up for the birthday party. You're like, what? You have to pause and think about that for a second anyway, but they might never be able to get there. That kind of thing. And so another thing to look for, it's normal, it's expected in typical development to go through what's called overgeneralization and undergeneralization of language concepts initially. And what that means is undergeneralization is that furry thing in my house is a dog, and that's the only dog on the planet.
Okay, gotcha.
And then the overgeneralization is all four-legged furry things are dogs.
Dogs, okay.
And then if my cognitive development, my sensory motor system is working correctly, I start distinguishing, oh, that one that's white with black dots on it is also a dog. This brown one is a dog. This one has curly hair. That's also a dog. I start distinguishing traits, and then I get better categorizations and can start fine tuning. And that's a cow. It says moo. And, we get milk from cows, and you start learning those are mental schemas. That's what helps me understand the big picture and the categories underneath that go together. So if I don't get that, it's really going to stall all kinds of development, lots of getting stuff done, executive function skills, but also language. So if your child can't categorize, that is something you definitely want to look at.
Okay, awesome. That's fantastic. And so I'm also reading. So I'm reading 2 books, of course, because I can't read one at the same time, or just one. I'm reading a book called Attention, Balance, and Coordination. And so I know you wanted to talk about attention. So how does attention and paying attention and executive function and all this, how does that impact language and communication?
Okay. So, and this is one of the biggest misnomers, especially there's misinformation or misunderstandings, I would say, more about with kids on the spectrum, is my child points, so therefore they have joint attention. I want to talk about a couple of stages here. In typical development, attention spans are not going to be long when you're 18 months, 2 years old, but you can see it growing and developing, and you can, we need to minimize distractions because they don't have the capability to tune out distractions and hone in on what they're supposed to. So we have to control the environment for them, birth to 5, but that lessens over time. And then there's a huge jump in our attention and executive functions between age 5 and 6, where I'm supposed to become much more independent. But part of attention, before we're even thinking about the ones who are being labeled ADHD or something like that, there is a thing called dyadic referencing, and people think it means that they're socially engaged with you, and it does not. So this is a big misunderstanding. What we want is triadic attention. Try 3.
Okay.
So you're one, I'm something else, and then there's a butterfly. We're sitting at the park and there's a butterfly. I notice the butterfly. I get your attention. I draw your attention to it. We both know that we're paying attention to the butterfly and enjoying it together.
Okay.
That must be in place before communication takes place, because what is communication? You and I have my mind on something. I want to say, hey, bud, what do you think about this? And then I want to listen to what you have to think, and you share your thoughts with me. That's triadic. We're talking about the cerebellum and Bryan and Heather. That's the triad. Okay. A lot of families think that if their child points, that means they have triadic attention, which is a precursor to meaningful communication. That is not the case. If I point to that butterfly and our brains are working the way we need them to, you don't think my finger is a separate object from my body. You know that's part of Heather, and that's indicative of my attention. Kids with autism, that's where a breakdown happens. They point and they will follow somebody's point, and then they think, oh, they're sharing attention with me. But they are following that point because they think that finger is an object. They kind of have an object fixation, and they do not recognize that as indicating what I am thinking about.
So disassociation there.
Yes.
Okay.
And so they follow a point and then point before they get to the show and like share stage. And that's where the breakdown is. And so you can even have a child sitting in your lap and you're both looking at a book, but if that child's not thinking about what you're enjoying about the book too, and looking at you and wanting to share it with you, that is not joint attention. That is something that's not known out there, and it's really important. So we want to do activities to grow that before we bombard them with labels for words to try to get them to talk. And that's really hard, because one of the most heart-wrenching things for parents is my child is not engaging with me. He's not talking. And that is so heart-wrenching. And if we do have joint attention, they're not talking. We want to label. We want to model communication big time. But for those kids, they're not there yet. And you're going to bombard their brains with that, and they can't learn the skill that comes before that.
Wow. Okay. Well, a lot to digest there. Okay. So there are people watching. So if you have a question, please make sure you ask. I'll see, make sure that I'm on the comments. Maybe I'm missing some, but I don't see any yet. So yeah, I don't see any yet. So, okay. But if you have a question, please ask. Okay. So let's dive into the heart of this. Why is my child not engaging? So we've kind of talked about some of the whys, right? I think there's a lot more there. I think you could go much further into it, but
yeah.
To try to keep this semi-brief today, let's discuss what is the best way to try to encourage or to get that engagement. Like, how do they properly help their child communicate in a more productive, more efficient way? So what do parents need to do?
What the number one thing you want to do is observe your child. That sounds so basic, but
it's a great thing to do. That's how you learn.
It is. It gives you a lot of information. What are they interested in? All of a sudden, that becomes the most interesting thing in the world because you want to share that interest with them. You follow their lead, go to where they are, and engage in what they're doing. That's number one. And you can also even get information about their spinning. That means their equilibrium. They're seeking movement information because it's under modulated. They're experiencing too little movement compared to what's actually happening.
Right.
Or maybe they're seeking auditory. Of course, some kids are avoiding it, and you want to be careful and avoid those so that you can have that engagement and they don't go into sensory overload. But if they're banging, they might be seeking auditory input. If they're rubbing their arm, what are games you can play where you get some stuffed animals and, oh, let's play doctor, let's rub, oh, they got a boo-boo. Whatever it is, fit in that sensory experience. I mean, they love pots and pans. They love that wheel. The wheel on this car, a lot of times kids with autism, because they do not recognize the whole, will hone in on one part even of a toy. And they love spinning wheels. So what I can do is I can go get a different toy that has wheels on it and just match and just don't over talk. You want talk some, but just imitate what they're doing and then break it up and you do something and try to get them to imitate you. But without high expectation. And I don't mean pessimistic. I mean without pressure is what I should say. Right. So follow their lead, observe what has their interest and what sensory information they're seeking, create a game out of it, and know what their turn looks like. Sometimes their turn does not look like what you're going for. But even if you made a silly face and they at least got away from what they're doing, that was a response. In other words, you've been imitating them and then you do something with the toy and they stopped and paid attention to the fact that you did something different with that car. That is a response in that moment. Okay. And so celebrate those small things, make note of those, and then take that as their turn. And then you go back to your turn. So it may not be you're talking to them and they're going to talk back to you. Their turn can look very different. And then listen to where they are. So I'm going to get back to that in a second. But what you want to do is once you have routines going, like they know this game, they like this game, and now they really engage in turn taking, how many turns can we get out of this? We have to be goofy and silly and fun to get them to pay attention to us. If they're watching a cartoon on TV, go join them in that and relate the concepts they know when they're watching that show that they don't get anywhere else in life to something else. Go pull out a book that has that, do something that they're also talking about bears or cars or whatever it is. If you're playing with a car, read a book about a car. That starts generalizing. Cars are not just this thing in my hand right now. These are also cars in this book. It's also cars when I see those on TV. So that's really important. But once you have a routine going, shake it up. If dad has something cool going with their son and we're getting some connection going, be sure you share that with mom and then have your child do that same game with mom, because I need to also generalize that I do this with multiple communication partners, not just with dad. That's part of generalization too. Do it in a different room. Or if they're running around, jump in front of them and make it fun, and, you know, not in a way that will scare them, but maybe they're going to giggle, and then that becomes a game where there's engagement. You want to, and we talked last week, you know, about creating barriers between them and what they want. That kids who are pulling you to what they want, that is not going to grow their development the way we need it to. Be less anticipatory. You may know exactly every single day all he eats is Cheerios, and so I'm just going to get the Cheerios out and pour out a bowl of them for him. What do you want? And just play silly like you don't know. And then
I get what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah. And then when they do, you can anybody on here who has a child who has really low language, with or without autism, I would encourage you to go check out, from a couple of weeks ago, a Facebook Live I did with Carla Cataret. She has her master's in education, and she is a sign language teacher. And a lot of people think that if they teach their kids sign language, it will delay development. Sign language is a recognized official language. You are actually can make your child bilingual and get that linguistic skills even stronger. And it can help get the concept across of cause and effect. I want something, I request it, then I get it. And that's a cognitive skill that translates into lots of things.
Yeah.
But again, you don't want to just teach one sign. Like, one of the big ones that people teach is more. and then they just start doing this, and it loses meaning. All I know is when I do this, exciting things happen, manna from heaven falls, and it's really cool. Mm-hmm. And then you're not expanding them. So once they know more, teach them more cookies, more juice, more whatever it is. But just keep in mind that there are many forms of communication. The PECS system, PEKS, for those who are just really profoundly delayed, is excellent. It's a picture exchange device, and there's a very clear system on how to teach that. There's also one that's called pause, keys, response, or something like that, where when they are echolalic, they are engaging with you, but it's just not quite right, where you teach them to pause.
Well, that's how their first thing.
But be fun. It's routine, but create barriers between them and what they want. Clear see-through bins that they cannot open by themselves, or they're out of their reach. Require a response, and you need to be consistent on this, or else it's very confusing. If they have to say open every single time they want that bin open, they know they have to request it. That's cause and effect. If dad does that and mom doesn't, or vice versa, I don't really learn that concept. And if you're blowing bubbles and they say open, and then you want to teach them open bubbles, open carton, open, but you don't blow bubbles for 15 minutes when they did that request one time. You close it. And again, play silly. What do you want? Open. And a lot of time, when I teach them signs, I will say the word with it, open. If they say, when they first start, you're going to have to do hand over hand and help them with the sign. Once they have that, let's get some language going. But when they're doing that, I will say, open. I say it. And then they start saying, oh, it starts developing. But you must require something. I mean, unless they're in danger, obviously, something like that. But 50 repetitions of bubbles opposed to 1, that's going to grow that skill much, much faster.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, awesome. I think the 2 big takeaways I know that I, as a clinician, have taken away, and I think that need to be emphasized, is observe. So I try to, when I have my autistic kiddos come in, I just observe their energy, kind of what they're doing, what mannerisms they're presenting, where they're going in the room. I think that's huge, because we try to corral or push them to do what we want to do versus, just understanding them and their, and in doing so, it just in the clinic, it dramatically changes their response. So
Yes.
pretty cool to see that. And then secondly, you and I communicate very fluently, and we do this all very easily, and we understand each other. But dropping that demand on them and using motion, single words has been also very helpful in my understanding and in my communication with my autistic kiddos. They do so much better. That again, that energy, the stress. So parents, I know it's hard. You want to look. I'm there, kind of with you too, in the sense that we want to communicate and like, hey, let's do this, blah blah. But bringing it down, you can just feel the energy and the difference in the response. And so I think that was huge. So thank you for that. That was awesome.
Yes. And I think we kind of promised to talk about echolalia last week on a little bit deeper level. I won't make it super confusing, but I want to share a few things. Echolalia is, I just repeat back what you said. Mm-hmm. Do you want juice? Do you want juice? I don't know how to answer that, so I ask the question to you. And a lot of times we don't celebrate that, but that is a higher level than you say, do you want juice? And I do nothing. Right. And even in typical development, repetition of speech I'm exposed to is part of language development. And by the age of 2, usually the little ones are mixing in their own utterances with those repetitions. So that's nothing to worry about as long as they're also using their own language. And then by age 3, echolalia is usually minimal or 0. Okay. And it should be. But sometimes they will lift part of what you said and not repeat the whole thing. So Bryan, you may ask me, do you want a snack or juice? And I say, do you want a snack? I am answering your question. I'm choosing snack instead of juice, but I don't know how to phrase it as a comment instead of a question.
Gotcha. Okay.
That is significant. They are actually answering you. And so it's that, and sometimes, or you're like, okay, it's time to get ready for bed. And they quote off some like mad comment from a movie they watched. And you're like, where'd that come from? That seems irrelevant. But maybe it was a comment where the person was telling something because they did not approve of what was happening and they are voicing their disapproval.
Got it. Okay, that's interesting.
Or, are you hungry? And then they'll start singing the jingle for Subway. And they won't just say, I want Subway. They'll be like, Subway, eat fresh, or whatever it is. But that is significant because they are making associations. That's a positive, even though from a language perspective, it shows that the what's happening cognitively. And then we want to model from their perspective how to answer. So when you ask me, do you want a snack or juice? And I say, do you want a snack? You're going to say to me, I want a snack.
Gotcha. Okay. So understanding what they're communicating and then helping them bridge the gaps there is what
that's right. And another reason kids use echolalia is like if you say, come to the table and eat, and they say, come to the table and eat. It might be because come to the table and eat, and their brain is one word.
Okay.
They don't understand come to the table and eat. And so doing those rhythm and timing games, anything to music and banging out beats, and that can be part of imitation and turn taking also, can help them hear those pauses and start understanding the units of speech. And sometimes they will use echolalia because they are learning sentence structure receptively, like comprehension-wise, beyond what they are able to produce. And so just know that there is a lot of information, even in the way they repeat what you say, the intonation. If they use a different intonation than you did, they're putting their own spin on it, and they're trying to convey, I know I'm supposed to respond, and I know my response is different from yours. That's a higher level. I still don't quite get it. Mm-hmm. And so we don't correct them. No, you don't say this. We just model it for them.
Interesting. Okay, so I have a question. I have no idea what your answer is going to be in this one. Does pitch matter? Tone of voice, like how you enunciate, and so I've noticed your voice has fluctuated when you're communicating a little bit. So I didn't know if that's, just you and how you communicate, or if that's something that you've tried to incorporate or you suggest.
Yeah, kids respond to music, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you speak with intonation, you're more interesting to them. There is a melodic thing to it. I didn't even think about it. It's so natural for me because I've been doing it for decades. I'm glad you pointed that out. I'm a little bit of an animated person anyway, if you haven't
Really?
noticed. But kids respond to that. And we talked about you need to be interesting to your kids, that melody to it. And sometimes, we've talked about the kids who are hearing things through a microphone and they're oversensitive. They might also be oversensitive to a monotone voice. Even if you're not yelling, they can perceive, and this applies, by the way, across the board with a lot of kids. They can misperceive frustration or anger that absolutely is not there. And so you really want to pay attention to your facial expressions, your tone of voice. A lot of kids, even that go into anxiety, and by the way, echolalia sometimes gets worse with anxiety. It can cause anxiety and it can lead to anxiety and sometimes even selective mutism. And so we want to nurture it without the pressure. And the W of that OWL acronym I gave you, WAIT, is so important in recognizing and celebrating what their response looks like. But they respond better to that. And you're exposing them to a variety of pitches when you do that. You're also helping them understand a sentence goes up at the end of a question.
Yes.
And it goes down when you make a comment. That some kids can start understanding question, comment, that concept, even if they don't understand all the words. And that helps them still have a better feel for what's being conveyed. They can understand when you do beats, and what some are louder. A louder beat is like an exclamation point said with feeling. And a softer beat is what I'm saying when I'm just talking to you one-on-one, making comments.
So. Yes, the communication isn't just the words, right? It's the tone or the inflections that are made.
And another reason why this is extremely important, it's important with everyone we communicate with. I mean, this stat hasn't changed since the dark ages when I was in graduate school. A lot of experts, now you're going to see some estimates that say 54, but most of them say 87 to 93% of what we convey to people is nonverbal.
Yep.
It's not our words, it's how we say our words, and it's our body language and facial expressions. So many of our kids, especially on the spectrum, but a lot of the kids we see, ADHD diagnoses, lots of things, don't feel their bodies the way they're supposed to. You've heard us talk about proprioception so many times. And so that's another reason why the tone of voice is even more important to them, because they're missing the nonverbals that are coming through our bodies, but they may pick up on the ones that are coming from an auditory standpoint.
Wow. Very cool. Okay. All right. Well, we've hit the half an hour mark. I'm trying to be consistent with this, little tidbits without overwhelming people.
Yes.
Okay. So, first of all, I'm a parent with a kiddo with language issues, communication issues. How does Brain Balance fit into this? Like, how do you all help us?
Well, for language, you're saying?
Yeah, just from this aspect, yes.
Yeah. Again, like with everyone, we're going to do a thorough assessment because we know what the building blocks of language are and development in general. And sometimes one challenge can mask another, and then you get older and you're like, this was totally overlooked, and we don't want that to happen. But it's still about the synchronization of the brain, getting all the parts of the brain communicating and processing information where I understand the big picture and the details. That affects language development. That impacts my organization skills, my critical thinking, all the things that I need for life. Is it coming from social emotional regulation issues? We got to take care of that. Is it coming from working memory issues? I comprehend what you're saying. I just can't remember. If I could remember it, I would understand it, but I can't even remember it. So we have to look at working memory. We have to look at, is it reasoning? And we look for those patterns. Is there a pattern of memory? Is there a pattern of reasoning? Is there a pattern of visual spatial concepts, which we often see with our kids with equilibrium proprioception? How am I going to learn those concepts if I don't know where I am in space, or if I'm having visual processing issues? So, literacy is a language-based disorder. And we have some kids who sound articulate, but it's only on more literal things. I mean, we're going to break that down. We break it down into what types of questions when they're reading do they get right and they don't get right. What kinds of executive functions are they lacking? Do they have predictive skills? Cause effect. Writing is one of the most challenging things people do. So there's just a huge body of research that tells us that kids with language delays have to be exposed to words to learn them. Many multiples. It's exponentially more than a child with typical development. And so where is that coming from? That's what we have to know. And kids with language delays also end up with literacy challenges, even if they don't show up in the first couple of years of school. So if I can't get my thoughts into words when I'm talking to you, it's also going to translate into my writing abilities. Although some kids they're very tied together. And at some point there's going to be a roadblock probably. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. We have a question here. Okay, are you able to see the questions?
I cannot, no.
Okay, all right. This is from Barbara. How would you start with trying to get a child that has ADHD and autism to be organized?
Okay. One of the, if there are underlying challenges, we definitely need to do an assessment and figure out what those things are. But one of the biggest things with a lot of our that's an executive function skill, one of them, but it's built upon all these other things we've been talking about. But usually a problem with organization comes due to the lack of mental schema we've been talking about. I don't understand the big picture and how all these details go in. We have kids who they say, clean your room. And it's like you have to tell them step by step. You're like, how do you not understand? You have clothes all over the place. And these papers are on the floor and that kind of thing. That is a mental schema. The big picture is the clean room, and the details are the things that go into cleaning the room. So a lot of kids diagnosed with ADHD have difficulty with the big picture. And so one thing you can do is to take a picture of a clean room or of an organized backpack. Or this is what it looks like when you're ready in the morning and you have everything you need before you walk out the door, what you're doing. And then you tell them to match that picture. When you have to every single time tell them all the parts that go into having a clean bedroom, that is a lack of mental schema. I haven't connected the dots about how these are related and how they go together. But when I match the picture, I am acting out the things that go into having a clean room. And then I create a mental schema of, it's like a categorization. Oh, these are all the things it takes to have a clean room. And then research shows us that starts translating into other things as well.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, there's a couple questions I get through looking at those and listening. But the summation of kind of what you were saying too is that these kiddos don't understand the parts for the whole or the whole for the parts. So they can't manipulate that back and forth.
That's right. That's so huge. It's called mental schemas. I mean, and sometimes there are other things that go into that. Sometimes kids have more difficulty following directions in a bunch of different places if they have spatial awareness issues visually or vestibularly or proprioceptively. And metacognition too, it comes into play a lot in these types of executive functions. That means I know what I know, and I'm aware of how to use it in ways that are relevant to this present situation. If I don't get how all the things go together, I also sometimes am unaware of what I know or that it's relevant to the current situation. So every time I face something, it's a brand new experience.
Yes, that's huge.
Yeah.
Okay. People are talking now. All right.
Good.
Let's see. Okay. That my wife, who's sitting right over here, wants to know if this will also work for her husband. So there we go.
Brittany, I'm sorry, honey. We'll talk later. I'll do what I can to help you.
Special counseling for me, I guess. Right.
That's awesome. I love her.
So Sherry said, I needed this when my son was little. He was diagnosed with ADHD. All right. Can you elaborate on that? Where else can we help you? Is there a specific question we can answer? I don't know how old he is. Is he school age? How old is he now? Okay. Elma asks, how can you explain to your child, I think this is what she's asking, how can you explain to your child or kids that they cannot play outside with other kids during this time because of the, all the restrictions and the virus? Like, how do you communicate that?
One of the best ways, honestly, is to use social emotional books. Social emotional books are so powerful for helping kids understand the world. And sorry, I was going to try to not say this site this time because I do it every time, but it's just the best. Freespirit.com has phenomenal books, and they come out with new books all the time. They have a lot that are very related even to what's going on right now. And germs are not for sharing, and just all. And they have books from the toddlers all the way through adolescence. But and then they also offer up activities to do to really bring the point home and to generalize that information, which is so important. So, and then it's a really good idea for, after you talk about that, to create your own story. Let's make up a story, and you're teaching them cause and effect too. But germs are not forever. They have a lot of things about worry is not forever. Germs are not for sharing. Not germs are not forever. Whatever. They have a lot of books that are very apropos right now that are excellent.
So one of the most interesting things that I've read, and you just brought it up, it was just creating a story, helping your child communicate, having them communicate in a story-like manner, like so that they can create this world themselves and learn how to communicate in the same manner. Because in reality, what we're just doing is telling stories, right? That's in the end what we're all communicating. That's how we communicate well. We remember well. We remember stories, right? And so I love that you pointed that out. And
you made me think of something that's really important. I love that you said that. I talk about social emotional books a lot. Last week, I briefly mentioned social stories. Those sound the same, but they're slightly different. Social stories are things that you can write by yourself that are like, when I get mad, I want to hit Tommy. I should not do that because it hurts his feelings. You're teaching them logically what you want them to know. And as we continue to nurture that social emotional development to where they're not doing it because we're saying not to, they're doing it because they genuinely care. Yes. But when something's confusing about the world, like I wanted to go outside and play with my neighbor today. My mommy said I couldn't, and that made me sad. The reason I can't go is because, and answer those questions, write pictures with it. And then you can even read that. It's just a really short story that you read each day, and that repetition starts kind of getting that point and that concept to sink in. That's a really excellent thing to do. And I encourage for kids who are really struggling to talk about social stories with teachers at school as well. And they can have a social story about something that happened at school that day that you can read before bedtime. If something significant happens in the home, that y'all write a social story back that you take. And that way you're really nurturing whole child and not just reading a map,
Yeah, it was my understanding from what I read. My understanding is when they're able to communicate, especially from like an emotional aspect too, like how they feel during this time, it helps them connect emotions with, a sense of what's happening, and helps them navigate, other people emotionally. So that's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, you cannot do too much of teaching emotions and passing the stick, tossing the weighted beanbag, and talking about or playing charades with emotions or musical chairs with emotions. And everyone acts out what makes them feel that way, mom and dad included. And that is very important because we are not shaming emotions. It is okay to feel what you're feeling. It is what you do with them. If they think they can only have happy emotions and they don't feel that way, they feel unworthy. And so we don't just want to talk about this makes me happy. And we sing, if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're mad and you know it, stomp your feet.
There you go.
Right? I mean, we need to talk about a rainbow of emotions so they know that is okay. We're teaching them to have that brake pedal and what you do with them. And when I understand how I feel, then I start understanding how my actions make you feel. And there comes more of that social emotional motivation for treating friends and parents and everything the way I need to.
I like it. Okay. Barbara has a question. Do you find that kids with ADHD and autism have such a big fear of people that are sick and being around them. So do you find that kids with ADHD and autism generally have a lot of, I think, anxiety is what choose, or fear around being sick people?
A lot of kids who have ADHD or are diagnosed with ADHD or autism have some obsessive tendencies. We have a lot of, like a little bit of on the germaphobe, leaning that way, or they don't want to get their hands dirty. There might some of that comes from, if I have a sensory sensitivity, it translates into, we talk all the time about how our sensory motor system grows, and then it translates into cognition. So if I have a tactile sensitivity about things that are sticky or dirty, it's going to translate into unease about germs. So there actually is a trend that way. On the other hand, the right hemisphere where a lot of this happens, that is our caution and fear. That's what gives us a brake pedal. And sometimes sometimes we have on the flip side, some kids where there is no stranger danger and they would jump on top, climb up a shed and jump down and not even think I could break my leg. That kind of thing. But if they have, but that also tends to go with sensory seeking. But if I'm sensory avoidant, but that there is definitely a trend towards a little bit of some obsessive types of tendencies. And we want to take care of those as quickly as possible, because those obsessive tendencies, sometimes they're seeking control of something because there are so many things that are out of their control. And then, so I feel out of control of these germs, so I'm going to obsessively clean, or it could be something unrelated, just counting things over and over, reciting something in my head. Did I lock the door? Did I lock the door? It can be anything, or lining things up. But when I do that, unfortunately, it releases feel-good chemicals in my brain. Like, that feels good. So now I'm going to control more things.
Scratch the itch. Yep.
And so you start having a response to that obsessive tendency, and it becomes more and more and more. And so it's really important to kind of nip that in the bud as early as possible.
So from a from a balance, coordination, cerebellum sort of perspective. Sorry, I didn't mean to hit my computer there. When we have poor body awareness, poor proprioception, we lose some executive function as far as prediction, right? Because we don't understand how we navigate in the world, and thus we have some anxiety too.
That's
so
right.
I see that commonly with my kiddos is they're naturally just anxious. And then when you're talking about being in control, that's a huge part of it, because they have so minimal, body awareness, body attention, inability to kind of navigate their world, that if they can control an aspect of it, they jump onto that. So absolutely.
And since we're talking about anxiety, I don't think I've ever worked with kids diagnosed with ADHD or on the spectrum who do not have anxiety. And
100%.
When the sensory motor system's not working right, like Bryan was just talking about, the guard dog of the brain, the amygdala, hijacks information where I can reason through, and I don't have to be a germaphobe. That would be part of my executive function to say, we need to practice hygiene, but as long as we do that, I'm safe. Even though I don't feel safe, I am safe. That is an executive function reasoning skill. But if my sensory motor system is feeding me the wrong information, that fear, that thought process doesn't even make it to the prefrontal cortex where I can have that reasoning ability that calms myself.
Yeah. So, brain's a fascinating thing. I love learning about it.
It is. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions out there? We've had some very good ones today.
I like Brittany's. Is there? I thought she had another one. I'm just kidding. All
right. Okay. Awesome. I don't see any more. There may be one that'll pop up here in a second. We'll find out. So Heather, somebody is listening to us and they're like, I want to go talk to Heather more. How do they get a hold of you?
hwells@brainbalance.com, or you can follow me on Instagram, The Hidden Churn. And of course, Brain Balance Katy, Southlake, Mansfield, Facebook pages, or Instagram also.
Very cool. All right. Thank you. And your email, not your email is on there, but you just said it. Your phone number and your website is on there as well.
Yeah.
All right. if you would like to get a hold of me, you can get a hold of me. You can direct message me on this. You can call me at 972-387-4700, or you can email me at dallassynergychiropractic@gmail.com. All right, Heather, anything you want to leave these parents with today? Any insight that maybe we forgot to discuss, or you're like, I really want to hit this point home?
I don't think so. I think it is just about, a lot of families come in thinking that they're being overly protective or a little sensitive to things, and like, especially if they talk to a spouse or somebody else and like, oh, you're overreacting. That's nothing. I had that same thing too. Listen to your gut. That's really hard if everybody's not on the same page. But if you're suspecting something wrong, there is probably a 99% chance that you are right. And the sooner you catch it, the better. We can, Bryan and I can help at any point or wherever you go, but the sooner the better, so that we don't increase the gap between where kids are and where they need to be. We want them thriving and not just getting by. And I'll just mention real quick, Tuesdays and Thursdays, in addition to the one I do with Bryan on Fridays, Tuesday, Thursday at 3:30, I bring in special guests and talk about topics too on those Facebook pages. And I really appreciate everyone's questions.
Awesome. Yeah. So just sorry. Oh man, I had a thought and it escaped me. So, that's what it was. Yes. Look, the initial years are very fundamental. Neural development, getting them within those first few years is huge, especially if your gut's telling you there's something there. By all means, start reaching out, because one of us has an answer for you. We can find answers for you. Two, look, it's an old belief. Back in the day, they thought that the brain was kind of fixed at a certain point, and that it did not have any change. It could not change. Once you're this, it happens. Neuroplasticity has completely changed the game. I mean, they're showing that, a 65-year-old can have the brain of a 25-year-old, assuming they do XYZ, right? So,
right.
Look, your child is not stuck. There's so many different things, so many different avenues that you can use to help your child and navigate some of the waters they're in. So, look, you just got to fight the right people, right? You got Heather and I here, but just understanding that they're not stuck, that they don't have to be there, and that being okay with, just time. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time. I think that's the most frustrating part for some parents. Like, I want this now, and I get it, but look, with some time, the brain changes and you can see some miraculous things. Heather's given us some amazing testimonies here over the past few weeks. Go back, watch those videos. Things can change. So just a little bit of time and a little bit of effort can do magnificent things for your kiddos.
And those challenges do not define them.
Absolutely. And also, yeah, just on that, look, when you see these things, these deflections, these behaviors, it's just telling you where your kiddo is. That's all it is doing. It's just a little bit of information. You can glean so much if you just listen and watch, okay? And so these kids are amazing. I've seen amazing things happen with them, but it's just telling you something. They're overstressed, that's not the way they communicate, whatever it may be. So lots of parents can get frustrated easily, and I understand it. It's just because you don't understand them. So that's what we're here. We're trying to help you understand your kiddos better. All right, Heather, I'm done. I'm a little burnt out right now, but,
I love burning you out. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, we'll be on again next Friday at 3:30. If there's a question, please still comment. We'll be happy to answer those for you. Please share this if you think it could help another parent. And then if there's something you would like for us to dive into, like, whatever may be going on in your life, please ask us, and we're happy to talk about that topic. All right, Heather, thank you again for everything you do.
Thank you.
Serve, and I'll see you next week.
All right, bye.
End.